Hey everybody, welcome to Comics Covered, where Matt and I, the co-founders of CoverPrice.com, talk about cool things that happened in the week using our website, CoverPrice, to kind of see trends. But something interesting this week, I see, if you're here, you probably saw the advertising for it. We are talking to the president of CGC. So Matt, what do you know about CGC?
They're a grading company. Let's do the short version.
Yeah, there you go, done.
That grades, let's say, comics, cards, video games, magazines.
They're at every single convention. The lion's share of comics that have been slabbed are CGC. When we track that data, it's mostly CGC data. It impacts the grade of your comic. It improves the trust. Everybody has some in their collection. We're going to bring on Matt Nelson, the guy who wrote this book about grading comics.
Wrote the book on grading comics.
Wrote the book on grading comics, literally.
That's a pretty powerful line right there.
And we're also going to give away 2 premium memberships to CGC worth about $150 each. We'll get into that in a second, but without further ado, why don't we bring in Mr. Matt Nelson?
Hey,
I should tell you, this show's very low key. We have very little graphics. A lot of them they're mistimed, and we don't have a lot of audio. And if we do, it's mistimed.
Hey, and my lighting is horrible, so it's all good.
Perfect. You're on brand for us then. That's perfect.
Yeah, people say our lighting's bad, our microphones are bad. So
thank you for joining us and for coming on and chatting with us. The structure, of course, we were just saying is it's going to be a kind of casual conversation. We have some questions for you. We'll take some questions from the people watching. But yeah, Matt to vote, and we have 2 Matts, so I have to now distinguish.
I mean, this is a great thing. We should have brought on as many Matts as we could.
There's a few.
Oh my God! Even at CGC, I know whenever we go to a convention, there's a couple Matts working the booth as well, and it just gets confusing.
Don's bald and I'm bald, and we have to say a third person can't be bald because 2, it's fine. 3, it's a problem.
Yeah,
I got some hair.
So Matt, you literally are CGC. How did you even get into comic books? How did you start at CGC, and how did you become the president?
Yeah, well, big story, long story, but I'll try and give the short version. So fell in love with comics at age 12. Started reading G.I. Joe. I collected the toys when I was a kid. That led me to my first comic store in this is Slidell, Louisiana, outside New Orleans. It was called Comics Plus, run by Rick Weems, and that's when I saw my first Silver Age books on the wall, and opened my eyes to all the stuff that came before. And then I found an Overstreet at my friend's house. His dad had one, and so that was happening at the same time. So basically, my whole world just opened up to this, all these, just the whole world of comic books. And so I threw myself into that long before I'd even seen anything, which I think added to the, the excitement, because when you know something's there and, you're going to search for it, and you're discovering it slowly over time, which was the case in the 80s and 90s, before the internet. And I think it really added to that excitement of my journey. And so that continued into the 90s. And then I met Bill Ponsetti, and he was opening up More Fun Comics in New Orleans at that time. This is late 92, right about when Death of Superman came out. And so I started working for him. I was in college and then did that for a few years. And that was a whole nother journey. And that led me to San Diego Comic-Con for the first time in 94, Overstreet Advisor, all kind of, seeing all these amazing books coming through. It was an amazing time. And then in 96, I trained with Bill Cyril, who was the father of restoration. It started in the late 70s, and he trained with Susan. And, basically it started all of that. So I had a chance to train with him in 96 and learn that craft. And then I conveyed that into a business of restoring books, which was still a very viable business in the 90s. This is long before, obviously, CGC and pressing. And then CGC came along, and 2000. And then quickly I started to, expand my services to include restoration removal, and then finally pressing, which of course we all know, blew up. And so that was my focus throughout the 2000s. And as I grew that business under Classics Incorporated, eventually CGC reached out to me in 2012 and wanted to buy that company and mirror it or bring it together with CGC, obviously the grading company, and have both services under one roof. So I moved there, and I've been there since 2013 February, and throughout that time transitioned over to grading, and then eventually became president in, I think, 21. And so that brings us to present day. So yeah, here I am at CGC. Reading books and doing everything.
Awesome.
You're speechless.
It's not me. It's not me. It's not my internet.
That is crazy. You must have seen so much in that time, especially in the 80s and 90s, kind of moving through, especially if you're getting into Silver Age books at that point, before the 2008 kind of Marvel explosion and everything that we see with modern variants. Silver Age really was, I think, the age to be in. I mean, that's a lot of collectors are looking at that. Did you ever, I mean, I'm jumping the gun a little bit, Matt, but I was going to ask, so you've probably graded and restored some really expensive comics. Did you ever have one that made your hand shake as you were doing it?
No, there was a couple of times. The biggest of the books were, yeah, they kind of, usually I guess I look at them as, I've done enough of them where I look at them as another project and I try to push the monetary value of the risk out of the way. But yeah, the biggest of the big, cause one to pause and to realize, what's going on in the moment. So, but you have to push that out of your brain. You really have to, because the second you start overthinking it is when, problems pop up. So, but I mean, the advantage of being not only, what I'm doing, but when I'm doing it. And it doesn't go for just me. It's the other graders at CGC, it's the dealers, it's everybody that's involved in comics the past 25 years, is, the transition from raw books into certified books, obviously all the best stuff's going through first, all the Action 1s, the F-15s, the high grade stuff. Eventually it just goes down. And, once those books are in holders, that's kind of your last chance to hold them and to study them, And so I think, having grown up and, been a part of that in the 90s into the 2000s and that transition, I was able to see, dozens and dozens of Action 1s pass through my hands, pressing, grading.
And then you kept one, right? Just one?
What? If just one?
You kept one at least, right?
Oh yeah, no. I never, I've owned a Tech 27. I've never owned an Action 1. Came close a couple times. Never have. It's eluded me. And every year, like the rest of us, it becomes,
You need to find one in your wall. That's what everyone seems to do. Like,
oh God, yeah.
People find like as installation in their wall. I think it happened once, but John's uncle found like when he passed away, right?
My cousin found a Captain America #1 in his wife's father's garage when he passed away. Box covered in soot, not even graded, not even in a sleeve. Wow. Wonder Woman 1.
Sensational Comics, yeah. With first Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Wow. But Captain America. Oh. So you knew somebody that knew somebody on that.
Well, it's his cousin. Yeah.
It was my cousin directly, yeah. It was funny.
Just sitting in the garage for years and years, just in a stack, loose, hanging out.
It's like there's 300 plus million people in this country. How many Golden Age books are left hidden in garages and attics? To find something, it's like the lottery. It's incredible that you even know somebody that found something like that, and they're still turning up. This year alone, we've seen. I mean, the Tech 27 that just got auctioned off Landry Auctions. Sure. There's been several early Golden Age collections that have surfaced this year. And it's incredible to think that they're still surfacing, because you think that stuff would have come out because that generation is, it's getting towards the end there. And it's like, the only way to turn up is to pass down to the one below it, the next generation.
Yeah. I know we have a ton of questions. We have a lot to get into. I wanted to bring up one before we get into it, which was interesting. So Comic Cutioner used the word entombed. Right, and do you find that as a derogatory word, or because a lot of people use entombed in a sense like it's in a coffin, it's stuck in there, you'll never get to enjoy it. It's kind of like, I mean, there's like, what are the two sides on your side? Because there's preservation, and then there's never getting to enjoy it. right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's been the discussion since CGC opened, and probably the case in a lot of collectibles. My thing is that there's always another copy out there to hold and read, a lower grade copy,
Right.
a cheaper copy, whatever. I mean, there's CGC's. It's about preserving, among other things, copies for the future, high grade copies that are worth money. That doesn't mean all copies. Take any given book, except maybe Action 1 in your top, 10 or 20. There's always going to be copies that are low enough grade that will probably never get graded. And if they do, it'll be far in the future. And so, those will always be handled and read.
Oh, it's a good pause.
and enjoyed. Yeah, there's always something else, and if you worry about the stories, whether it's, I'm sure that, there's reprints of the older stuff, graphic novels, there's all kind of stuff that,
I mean, as I've always seen it, it's kind of like, you get a new pair of shoes and you try to keep them perfect for as long as you can. And those are only like $80, right? You have something in your hand that's worth hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars. You kind of want to not read it, right?
Exactly. There's the value aspect is tied to the grade, and the grade's tied to preservation. And so that's where CGC's role is. So you inevitably, to protect your book as best you can, is protecting your investment. So
when you have someone's brother sit on your comics.
I knew that was coming up. I've known that in second grade, and he won't let it go that my brother sat on one of his comics once on my bed.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was Wolverine 50, the die cut cover. It was like, okay, it's not a very valuable book, but as a kid, I was like, this die cut slashing through the book. It was the best book and sat right on it. And it was
I will say, because of that, Matt did teach me, whenever I'm reading, like, I always think of a comic when I buy it, like, okay, I might get this slabbed. I might, get this graded. It might be worth something. So I'm always like, just very gingerly reading it, never roughing it. You just very careful, put it back.
Yeah. Someone caught me once. This was like early on, like probably in my 20s. And he brought some books for me to look at, and he was like, oh, you're a collector. You're like, oh, how can you tell? Because you're holding it from the bottom and you're turning the pages instead of like, reading it like a book. Because you do the thing where you hold it in your palm and you open it, you're like gentle with it, right? You're a collector, I could tell.
Yeah, no, I think the having it's like the comic book. It goes beyond, CGC goes beyond the value. I think I've noticed over the past several years that people like it in the holder. They like it framed in that, that beautiful plastic with that label, and it really just adds a whole nother level to it. And so I feel like a lot of people collect certified books or get books certified for reasons beyond just investment. I think it's just, it frames their book so nicely, and it looks so pretty. And they always have the copy to read if they want to. But it seems like certifications transcended just values at this point.
Totally.
All right, John, you want to go to it? What's the first question there?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious about like your book. So this came out a couple years ago, and I remember we ran into you at one of the cons, and I think you gave us one of these, which much appreciated. How did you distill decades of comic grading into a book? And
did you feel like you were dying and you had to get it out of your brain? Like,
yeah. You're gonna be around a while, right? You're not going anywhere.
No, it was kind of like the obvious thing to do, because when I got to CGC years ago, 12 years ago, I guess, I was like, where are the standards at? And so at the time, the company was still small enough that there was, the standards were kind of an ether. It's like it was just an understood, an aura, like a layer of knowledge in the room that had really not been, captured, or at least, down to such a minutia level. And so I saw, I guess it was an opportunity, but it was more like a necessity. Like, we have to get this down. We have to drill down on this. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it started. And so, the group of us, the senior graders, got together over a course of, a year or two. And we went defect by defect, and ended up being over 100 defects, and boiling it down to literally like a chart with, grades, otherwise creases. What is, this length crease in this grade, otherwise equals this. Mm-hmm. And so that was the foundation of the grading guide. And then beyond that, it was like, the purpose of the book is not just to show that we have standards that we use, but it was to also involve all the other things with certification and the history of comics and comics themselves, how they're printed. everything, every aspect I could think of that involves the physical aspects of comic books. And so it was an opportunity to kind of put everything in one book in addition to the standards. And that was, and then it just ended up becoming a crusade that lasted 7 years. And it got to a point where I'm like, oh my God, I've got to get this thing out. This is a beast, And so, I pushed at the end there to push it out. And so it's, I'm glad it's done. There you go. I don't know. I will see what effect I guess it has or had on the market.
Some of the broad things to grading is obviously a complicated process at the front end. What's interesting about it is you have to deal with discrepancies between gradings. You have to consistency across grading companies, across the graders, and then you have people that are very concerned about how the label looks, right, and how the slab looks, how it feels. It comes up with all the other grading companies that have ever popped up. Some of them have not grain preference because of a bad label, which is interesting. So it's kind of like it is the presentation plus the consistency. Like, how do you it's a lot to navigate. So when you're going into leading this company and you're coming up with all these things that you have to deal with consistency, trying to think of new slab concepts, and how do you create that consistency across your team while trying to innovate, I guess, is the big question, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It is an ongoing thing. So there's two components I look at. We offer kind of a hybrid. We offer a service and a product rolled into one. So the service is the grading, the product is the holder and the label. Right. If you want to differentiate those two. But as you pointed out, the label has a life of its own, just like the holder does. And so you're balancing multiple things that you're giving the customer. As far as the grading goes, the grading is something that kind of started here when we started, or they started 12 years before I got there. And it got distilled down to, a very, very specific, narrow way to grade. Within these parameters. And so that's something that is become very, finite. And then you have to, balance it, it's like a ship that you just have to move very slowly, Sure. Any change is going to create, ripples in the marketplace. And so that's something that you have to really kind of keep on point. And so we do that, obviously with a team of graders by, constantly analyzing data, Sure. How we graded books, we analyze our grades against each other. And we do have grading tests that we run through and run the graders through these triangulation tests and all these things. And so there's all these things that we do behind the scenes to try and maintain that consistency.
Is it still 3 graders? Is that the process that goes across 3 graders and you take whatever
before you go back, I imagine white gloves, a hermetically sealed room.
No gloves.
Oh, no gloves?
Independence. No.
Whoa. That's a huge misnomer.
Oh, no.
Huge. I see that more than anything online. People are like, why aren't they wearing gloves? That's bad for grading because for a lot of reasons, but it gets in the way of your tactile sense of the book.
It's like cocaine style where everyone's naked in a room.
That's we don't need to be completely naked to grade books.
Okay.
Hands have to be naked. But
you gotta feel the book completely.
Yes, you have to feel the book.
Taste it.
That's right.
Yeah, taste is the only sense that's not included. Smell is, hearing is, believe it or not, sight and touch. Those are the 4. Smelling. I'm sorry, taste is not. We haven't got that far yet, but yeah, you need to have feel is obviously one of the most important ones.
Sure.
And so, and not only that, but when you wear gloves, they kind of get in the way, and you don't have that tactile sense. You can like pull a cover, put a tin on the cover. I mean, it's really gets in the way. So we just make sure that we wash our hands. We're very cognizant of that.
And it's like John, we were saying, is it 3 graders still? That how it works?
Yeah. So there's multiple. It depends on the tier of book. And so the higher the tier, the more graders we have. But we have multiple graders on books, and we definitely have a system of checks and balances because that's one of the ways of achieving consistency with the grading. And so this is obviously you have sometimes you have a book. You know, it's not just based on value. Obviously, if we have an action, one in the room, we're going to have several pairs of eyes on it. But there are many times throughout every day, because we encourage the graders to converse with each other throughout the day. You know, all tiers, all teams, all types of books, to get second, third, fourth opinions beyond what the team is already. And so there are times where we'll have 5 or 6 or 7 people looking at a book because, you know, it's at the end of the day, grading is subjective. And so, you know, throughout the day, we will have books where we differ on grades, sometimes widely. And that's just the nature of the beast. You know, we'll have some books where the grade range literally runs from like 5.5 to 6.5 or 7, you know, based on some weird defect. And so the idea is to, you know, a lot of books are very straightforward. You know, they're easy to grade, particularly the higher grades where you can quantify defects. And then you come across the tougher ones, which might have an anomaly as a defect, or might be lower grade, or have restoration, or something that complicates, you know, the grading process. You simply get more opinions on that. So it's just a matter of knowing when to ask the right questions.
There's some a comic cutioner again brought up another good point. You're talking about AI. Now, this is something that we get hit with all the time, is like, hey, why don't you just use AI for algorithms? And of course, it's never that simple. It's a very complicated process to like bring all these calculations in. There are grading companies for cards that do, not grading companies, but there are card companies that have electronic grading of some sort. I don't know how efficient they are or not. I don't think any of the other graders that in the card market that are doing any AI. But do you see that coming into play in the future? Do you see that, you know, electronic version of grading down the road? For
comic books, I don't. Maybe it could happen. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe, you know, I'm underestimating AI, you know, in 10 or 20 or 30 years. But I think for me, the biggest hang up, which is not really the case with coins and cards, is that they're two-sided. Whereas a comic, you know, has all the layers, you know, the interior pages, which presents another litany of challenges in grading. So but even cards and coins being two-sided, there's so many things that you have to look at with the coin, you know, angling it, and also, I don't know, maybe even, you know, tactile, you know, touching.
Surface wear,
yeah. And so we're not there yet. I think if we get there, and I'm not going to say never, you know, but I could see, you know, coins and cards, you know, obviously cards, they're, you know, people going in that direction already have been. We'll see how that works out. But comic books, you know, even weighing comic books, we considered, instead of counting pages, weighing comics. Well, but the problem is that you have to open the book anyway to look at the page quality.
Right.
At the centerfold, you have to see if the staples were, you know, disassembled, you know, which opens up a whole nother thing with grading. And so there's so many things going on with the interior of a book that require eyesight and you know, going through it page by page, that it just seems that at this stage AI is, you know, too cumbersome. It just wouldn't work. You know, now it can work in other ways, which, you know, we're obviously always pushing on that front, in terms of like processing books, you know, receiving, submitting, things like that. But as far as actual grading goes, I don't. I think we're a ways off, if ever.
All right.
We always said, you know, before we started Cover Price, we're like, oh, it's comic books, it's easy, and then we're like, oh my God, there's so many different variants, variations, grading. Like one comic book literally has in our database like 50 different metadata points, being it raw, being it slabbed, being it a variant, being it not, being it signed, signature, all that stuff. I can only imagine how tricky it is from a grading perspective. And thank you for kind of going into that, because I didn't even think. You're right. Every single page needs to be graded. All the staple. Yeah. Is there mold on it? I didn't even think about smell, touch, like
people probably aren't smelling cards. I
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not.
unless they have that bubble gum still attached to it, where you need to get that old.
There you go.
Probably not smelling coins.
Does it bother you at all when people say like the difference of a 9.6 and a 9.8 is whether the grader had a good day or a bad day? There's a more vulgar version of that, but it is the most common thing that people say, like, oh, the grader must have had a bad day. You know.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. No, I've been hearing that. You know, hell, I probably even said that back in the day. But yeah, no, I think
there's a vulgar version that I want to say, but I won't say.
Sure, of course, we all know what that is. Right. But no, I mean, again, grading is subjective. That is, and it's not just it's the greater, it's the fact that these books, particularly the older books, are like unicorns in terms of the type of defects that they exhibit. There's no two books that are exactly alike if you go back far enough. And so that subjectivity is always a factor in grading, and you can chalk it up to, a bad night or, a bad mood or whatever the case is, hangry, and, but I mean, that's the battle that we fight there with consistency in the room. So, that's, I'm not looking at it from an hour to hour, a daily basis, but, as is the grader as a whole, somebody that is on target and can be consistent through that.
And Matt, how many books come with $20 bills slipped in there as well?
Not as many as you would think. We get bribed a lot less than I thought we did when I showed up. I was like, okay, what's going on here? No, it's like they actually, I think, we don't, I think people at this stage realize that we can't be bought, so they don't try.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
They'll be like, the notes will come back, $20 imprints in book, 7.5. Like, damn it.
Yeah, it's encased in
it's like encased in it. Like, yeah.
Right.
So,
we probably would do that.
So Cgc's had a lot of different redesigns throughout the years and stuff like that. And you've had custom labels and regular labels and stuff. From that, can you kind of talk about the evolution of where the case got to, where it is? And do you have any changes or things you can share with us about future designs or changes to the design?
Well, tidbit on that. I know in the past year, you had to change it several times for multiple reasons, right? That all the stuff that happened in the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was, last year was definitely a result of some changes. Rough year. This year's been very smooth. And, we, obviously we are learn and evolve constantly, continually. And, last year was no different than years prior, but of course, you have to, you have to grow and change with everything. So, the changes that, we're constantly making changes to things. Some things are subtle. Some things are more, obvious that we announce, so there's changes going on behind the scenes that people don't know about. But there's also changes, there's changes we've had in the past that we announced. There are changes that, could be coming in the future that we announce. We're always working on new things. I hate to be vague about it, but, I don't want to.
No, I mean, you have to. There's too much coming. Everyone's working on stuff. I mean, it's always, you think like how much more innovation can be done in a case, but it could probably always be better, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like earlier I was talking about the grading and being kind of like, narrowing. The holder is more of a, like an evolutionary, there's always ways to improve the holder over time. Now, I think, we're getting it, the changes are getting more and more subtle to where I think we have a great design, certainly aesthetically, certainly after last year, we've got, the security, and then those things are going to continue to improve. But I think that the changes over the years, if you want to talk about the history, the dramatic effect of the changes has reduced. So, for instance, the first big change was the label in 2004, which was a dramatic change. And you would expect most dramatic changes to occur in the early years of the company when they're trying to kind of find their footing and then just, kind of refine it over time. And so the label went from the little tiny print to like the big print, kind of similar to what we have now. And then 2004, that label, the changed, and then it changed again to 16 to what we have currently. So that's the label evolution. And then as far as the holder really only made one major change, and that was in 16. And that was obviously when we went from the, anybody that's been around long enough or has the older holders can tell the difference, just by feeling it. The old holders shifted to the new, currently what we have now that came out in 16. That really hasn't changed much. So we've made minimal changes to it. Again, these are things that are so subtle that, we're not going to announce anything, but it helps with, so many things, clarity with the holder and productivity of the holder and, the durability and the security. These things are always changing, but anything major that we think is, certainly worth announcing, you'll hear about it. And we've always got new stuff around the pike. So,
And Matt, I know one of the things that came up, and just it will help just to get clarity around it. a lot of people think that 9.9s and 10s are much easier to get now, because there was an email blast saying that I forget what it was. It was like some type of announcement that things are getting looser. I can't remember what the verbatim was, but the conversation has been that it's now easier to get 9.9s and 10s. It's just general consensus.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. We again, when I'm working with the graders, and we are as a team trying to, find that consistency in the grading. The end of the day, it's like a 9.9 is a 9.9, a 10 is a 10, and 9.8 is a 9.8. I mean, we have clearly defined standards for that. So we are simply trying to hit that mark every time. If the market's perception is that we're giving out more now, I don't know. That's I don't know.
Hasn't been a conversation per se where it's like you're like, hey, give more to 9.9s.
No. The conversation's always like, grade the book as it is. It's not a matter of like trying to get looser or tighter or whatever. It's like the book is what it is. And so, when you start grading, you start at a 10. You don't start at a 9.8. Yeah. So if you're grading a 10, or if you're starting at 10, then, you obviously, you can very easily quantify the defects at that level. And if it has, one or two things here, it goes to 9.9, it goes to 9.8. And so it's just a matter of making sure that we're following the standards that we've set up for ourselves.
Because what's fascinating about it is, like, for example, we see so many books, and this one case is in my head because I've never seen a modern version of this. Amazing Spider-Man #1, the M&M Spotlight. There was multiple M&M covers with Spider-Man by Salvador Larroca. There was one that was a color version. There was one that was the Spotlight version, and then there was one that was signed. Now, like, here's the difference: a 9.8 of the Spotlight sells for $1,100, but a 10 sold for $10,000. That is like that one little grade off, but like, from that jump from 9.8 to 9.9 to 10, especially in a modern book, I can't imagine it just boggles my mind that a modern book can get to that price, and only because of a grade, right?
Yeah.
It kind of blows my mind just of how high some of these grades can get. So there is still a premium put on a 10 and a 9.9. It feels like there's great power.
There's lots of responsibility with that as well.
Lots of responsibility with that, right? Yeah. No, and because of that, we're very careful assigning the 9.9s and 10s, because we want to make sure they truly are 9.9s and 10s and are going to be perceived that way in the marketplace. That is a huge responsibility, and I think that we've had success this long because we've been responsible with that power, and made sure that when these books go out in the marketplace in those grades, that they look like what they are, and so, it's not, it's certainly not, it's easy for a company to come into the space and, especially this stage, and say, I'm just going to give 9.9s and 10s because that's what people want. That's what brings them over. But that's not the answer, because, the standard has been set, and that's simply just, taking advantage of, or just arbitrarily choosing grades. These books truly are rare on these grades, and we scrutinize these books very closely for these grades.
Sure.
And so, it's when we give it, we mean it. And it's all about the grade. It's not about the value of the market or anything like that. None of those outside forces are influencing our grades.
What's interesting to that is, and I think, Matt, you might be saying this as well,
sure,
but there's definitely a difference when you see it from CGC versus a different grading company. There's kind of a premium, I think. Like, people do trust what we see in the aftermarket. Like, people do trust CGC grading, and they kind of anticipate maybe an inflation on some of the other grading companies. Not that they're bad or anything like that, but just that is one thing I've noticed as well, is people will be like, oh, this other grading company has it, so it's not selling for as much as CGC all the time. There's been shifts in times where that's been different, but I do notice, I think CGC does have a level of respect that kind of commands a little bit higher in the aftermarket. I don't know, Matt DeVoe, if you agree with that.
Well, and just to kind of follow up with this, there's a lot of good points that are being made. Like Derek said, 9.9s and 10s that definitely increased. You can see it in the census data, which then on counterpoint is that you have like better quality paper, better quality covers, metal covers. You know, like there's books that have a better chance of getting these perfect grades because of the material being used. I would probably say that, Matt, you could probably answer this. Are there more books being graded today than there were 5-10 years ago? You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah. Now COVID, you know, that was kind of a blip. that we should probably take that little period and set that
So
aside.
we should have sent books to get graded in right at COVID would have been our best shot to get it.
Yeah. But if you're going back 5 years, certainly 10 years, absolutely. And quality has gotten better. Pressing has gotten better. People's eye has gotten better for submitting. You know,
how do you feel about pressing, by the way?
Oh, I think it's horrible.
I mean, because it's one of those restorations that's allowed, right? It's one of the few restorations, if you want to call it. Some people don't call it restoration.
Oh God, don't call it restorations.
Okay,
kidding?
all right, don't call it restoration.
No. And the grading guy will break this down for you. No, don't.
Yeah. Why would you call it? Is it because you're not changing any part of the original book? Is that why it's not restoration?
Yeah. Restoration is returning something to its previous state through artificial means, like adding things, adding paper, changing. You know, sure. Pressing is simply just removing. You know, you're manipulating the book itself, but you're not adding to it. You're not taking away from it. You're just bring it back to where it was before in its, you know, its natural state. You know, the very lightest, you know, bends and creases and things like that. So, you know, it's restoration is certainly a different ball of wax. So yeah. I mean that's an age-old conversation there. Yeah.
I mean it's a game that people play too. They'll read the notes, they'll buy a book that sounds pressable, get it, crack it, press it, send it back, right? And then hope to get that higher grade. I tried that once. I did it with Wolverine Origins 10. It was the first appearance of Dakin, the third claw variant. I had a 9.6, had a slight crease. I sent it to a presser who did not know that there was an insert in it, and pressed it with the insert. And when I got it back, it was a 9.2. So, you know, I mean, you got to be mindful of those things, and it's cool, right?
There's so many nuances to pressing, and especially when you're involving previously certified books. You know, there's, you know, when I screen certified books all the time. That's what I've done since the beginning. And there are people who look at a book and say, oh, you know, it's got pressable defects. It's going to increase in grade. No, you know, you have to take both the pressable and the non-pressable defects into consideration. Then you have to factor that into the grade. When the grade was assigned, and the grading scale of CGC over 25 years, you know, knowing all the patterns of grading and all the, you know, the periods and everything, it's become very nuanced, particularly with the older books or certified books. But yeah, as far as new books go, as you pointed out, there's a whole nother set of challenges, which is particularly with the modern books, is the type of paper, the inserts. There's so many things to consider with that, and so it's not as straightforward and easy as it sounds. You know, but at the end of the day, I think that, you know, pressing has evolved to the point where, you know, people know how to do it. They know how to do it well. And there's enough people doing it well that it's, you know, it's a legitimate enterprise. And at the end of the day, people want higher grades. They want their books maxed out before they get it graded. And as long as the books look natural to us, then, you know, we're going to give it a universal label. We're not going to downgrade for any reason, and it gets what it gets. And that's it.
I will say, Sean, Big Leg you've talked to him on Brian McClay's show and a couple other shows, but he's my presser and he's fantastic. So
Question for you from Grumpy G. Why is cleaning considered restoration if you're not adding anything but cleaning? You're removing.
So that brings us to a very interesting topic that is, I think, very a timely topic right now. So cleaning. What are we talking about when we say cleaning? So before,
a whole bunch of bleach on top. That's what it is.
Yeah. So before, let's say a few years back and then prior, there was dry cleaning, solvent cleaning, and wet cleaning, which is essentially like water cleaning. Dry cleaning is part of the pressing process. That's fine. That's just a dry eraser, you know, as an example, to remove dirt and surface, you know, things, foreign substance. Totally acceptable within the confines of universal label. Solvent and water cleaning got more into restoration because you were taking the book apart, you were soaking the cover in solvent or water or whatever with chemicals. And so that would change the physical properties of the book, and then that could result in a purple label or a conserved label. But now you have a new thing on the horizon. And the reason I bring this up is because there's a book that was just released a few months ago that I wrote the foreword for. So I feel,
Oh, nice.
yeah. It's a book on comic book conservation. So if it's on Amazon right now. So Paul Kosnick and Shelby Thompson, shout out to them. They're two PhDs that actually did a lot of research into paper restoration, paper conservation, paper preservation, deacidification, photo bleaching, all these different aspects of people that work on paper, conserve paper, and how it relates to comic books. And so they wrote this book, and it's just this, amazing scientific dive into all the different ways that you can, all the aspects really of comic book conservation, which can include, besides cleaning, deacidification, photo bleaching, leaf casting, restoration, removal, pressing, it covers the gamut. Now, so some of this stuff, a lot of it is, ends up in a conserved grade, but some of it kind of straddles the line between universal and conserved. So I think cleaning is a big aspect of that. And I think we're on the precipice of another direction that the hobby's going in. Pressing is kind of, the past 20 years has been about pressing. But now I think we're moving into a new area where cleaning is becoming a factor. And people should read this book because, there's still a gray area in terms of like the photo bleaching, in terms of like where it crosses the line between, become a cover becoming conserved or not. But it's, not harmful to the book. And there's more and more people that are doing this. CGC's not doing it, but we're certainly keeping a close eye on it. But yeah, it's so clean. The line with cleaning is moving. It's or at least what's being done. What constitutes cleaning comic books is changing. And so that's something that's definitely a movement in the hobby right now that we're keeping a close eye on.
It's a 100-year-old hobby. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be all these different technology shifts and stuff like that towards restoration, especially if there's an incentive for money, behind it, or it could be worth more. So yeah, it's interesting that you guys have to, definitely keep an eye on that as the market kind of shifts towards, as it continues to evolve and grow.
And there's there's probably no exact answer to this, but like, how long can paper be preserved for? We know VHS, it was never designed to survive forever. It degrades, the tape inside degrades every year just naturally because it was never meant to sustain, decades. But like paper can be a little more robust. Clearly there's the papyrus scrolls have been around for thousands of years. I think thousands of years, hopefully maybe hundreds, I don't know. But yeah, that's the big question. How long can paper be preserved for?
Yeah. And the horrible thing is that, a lot of the pulp paper from the 1900s, the 20th century, and the late 1800s was wood pulp, which is not, it's ephemera. It's meant to, fall apart and degrade.
Right.
And so, yes, it's a very pertinent question in our hobby is preservation going forward. We're not going to see it in our lifetimes, but this paper is going to continue to degrade. And so in the book, I really tout deacidification as being one of the aspects of conservation that I think is the most important, because that's the one to me that retards that degradation. And but the photo bleaching, I keep bringing that and all these other forms that are in the book. The intent is to remove from the book the impurities, the stains, the boxing, the tanning, the oxidation, and so where that how far back you pull it. What the end result is where we come in, as far as the gatekeepers in terms of, is it going too far or not? But, I think there is an altruistic endeavor in the book in that it is about preservation of these ephemeral items going forward in the future that, decades and certainly hundreds of years from now are going to be at risk of falling apart. And so, somewhere in here is the future. But like you said, though, it's like, value is the driving force in it. So you have to balance that.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Let me jump to this real quick for everybody who's watching. We're doing a giveaway with CGC right now. You might have, if you're following us on any of our social or anything like that, you probably see this. But Matt DeVoe has a great eye for these things, and we went at C2E2 and got all these books. Matt literally looked at them and tried to find the best ones, and then CGC was able to do on-site grading at C2E2, which we should talk about because I know that's a new thing that you guys are doing, which was pretty amazing. You bring it in, and the next day it's pretty much graded for you.
Yeah.
But if you guys aren't entered in this, I'm going to drop the link into the chat right now. Be sure to click over to this and sign up. We're gonna pull the winners tomorrow night, or by Wednesday you'll know. Tomorrow it's still another day of entry, but you can win some of these amazing C2E2 covers, all graded, all 9/8 from CGC.
Yeah. Yeah, and seriously, like the best way to become good at grading a comic is by sending them books that you think are the grade and then seeing what you get back. You learn very quickly how bad you are at grading, and then you get better at grading.
That's it. That's
When
it.
money's
That's
on
it.
the line.
Oh, I send somebody books. I'm like, oh, this is the 9.98, and it comes back as an 8.5. I'm like, oh, I did something wrong.
If you get an
And that's
8.5 on
something.
a book you thought was a 9.8, that's
Well, it's like
get
you
some
gotta check the back. That's always like, and you're like, oh yeah, there's a huge crease on the back. I didn't even bother to look at that.
I tell you, we look. Yeah, a lot of times it's just how long and how deep you look at a book. And
Sure.
look, the best advice I give somebody is tilt it in a raking light, shine the light on, create like a mirror, a mirror of the cover, and you will see things that you never would have seen looking straight on at it. So that's my advice.
Fingerprint.
It's such a bummer. You're like, I'm gonna send this in, and then you see that crease, and you're like, do I gamble?
Yeah.
And then do you send it in and see what you'll get? Because that's the thing you don't know. The thing that's hard for us to tell is like when you do see, let's say it looks perfect except for one small crease. Like it could be a 9.6 to one grader, and it could be passable for a 9.8, depending on what it is.
Oh yeah, we call them 9.7s, 9.5s, 9.3s.
Sure.
Yeah. Although there's books that walk the line, and it could go either way.
You ever go? Will you ever go back to the Wizard first days where you go back to a 9.5?
Well, we're talking about all these, changing, evolving, expanding. Yeah, why not 9.1, 9.3, 9.5, 9.7? Why not, right?
But those 9.5. What's funny is like those 9.5 slabs are worth more because of the slab and the grade.
Yeah,
that's
it's worth more than a 9.8.
That's the crazy thing about this hobby is like you can find variations within variations. Like look at like errors, look at like misprints, look at signatures that are just like a little AH for Adam Hughes versus his full name versus Todd McFarlane's signature. Like anything that makes it a little different creates print run.
A Canadian price variant double cover signed by Stan Lee in a 9.5 holder. That's like the unicorn.
I mean, luckily they only did about, I think, 10 titles in the Wizard first 9.5. So there weren't many. But I remember when Wizard, it was a failure for them right off the bat. And I remember it was on their site. You could buy them for like $20 a piece. And so when Young Avengers 1, the sketch variant, got hot, that was one of the Wizard first 9.5s. It was selling for $2,500. Wow. And where a 9.8 was selling for $600.
Wow.
It was, people were paying for that label, which is fascinating. That people will pay that premium. Yeah. Again, it's like it's a mixture of both. People will pay for that label. People will pay more for a red label because they think that the grading was tighter back in the early days of CGC.
Yeah, it seems like rarity is a big factor there, where you've got it's the rarity in grade 9.9s, rarity in a 9.5 anomaly, rarity in a variance, rarity in that which you're talking about. I mean, there's it's having something special. I think it's that differentiates itself from everything else.
Do your graders get like do they celebrate when they get a book that they've never seen before, and it's like they get this little pause and all the Spawn ones that come through, the Spider-Man 300s, and
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. We have every once in a while we have.
Like, have you seen this?
Yeah, we do it. We do that with books we've never seen, or at least defects we've never seen. Yeah, we there's oh my god moments throughout the week, where it's like, oh my god, it's like what, what is it? And so
you should let those users know, the people that turn that in, let them know that you had that, because that's kind of a proud moment to like turn something in where you made people stop and be like, hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe we should do more of that. Yeah.
People would love it. It goes so far to let people know, like, hey, you did something that was a little bit different and it made us happy.
Get a sticker that you just put on the slab that said, "Oh, you stumped us," or like, "Oh, that was cool," and then that'll become a thing to get the sticker and all that stuff.
I mean, would you ever do something like it was like first slab? Would that like ever get onto a slab label, first one graded or something?
First one graded. Well, so are we talking about vintage or new kind?
Anything modern, anything. First off the line,
Oh, yeah. Well, they have that in coins actually. In our coin, which when you guys started the show, you're like cards, comics, magazine. I'm like coins. That's how we started.
I said coins. I said coins.
You say did you? But coin. And so what they do in coins is they go to the mint in different countries and actually work with them, where they have the first coins off the line, and those are specially certified. So yeah, that's kind of like, I think that's what you're talking about, like the first.
Yeah, like I would love if I sent in a book and I'm the first one in there. It would be an incentive to send in all the books that people feel like they're not worthy to get graded. Like, if it's a book that sells for $1 or $5, it's an incentive to be like, I want to be the first one to get that little first off the line designation.
It's like what we're talking about with the owning the one of something that differentiates from everything else.
Yeah. Everyone wants something special. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right, I have to get in touch with Marvel and DC and get into their printer and work this out.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's just on your label, just on your like first one graded.
Everyone in the chat, if you want to enter to win, CGC's kind enough to give away 2 premium memberships. And so what that is, it's worth about $150. And if you have this premium membership, you get 10% off of all your future things you send in, and they give you $150 credit towards grading. And I think there's probably some other perks in there that I'm totally forgetting. But I mean, it's a pretty good deal.
So that's like 3 books if you want same day turnaround, and that's like maybe 6 books fast pass, maybe 5.
Right.
That's fast pass. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask though, it came up. I think Cgc'S actually asked this. One is the same day grading going to be a thing at cons moving forward, and 2. Has CGC ever thought about branching out to other like either comic book shops or game stores or something to have great like on-site grading satellite kind of companies?
Well, we talked about that at the beginning real quick. I thought or maybe we did off.
No, it was before the interview, before we started. Yeah. So yeah, yes, we're doing, well, first off, we're doing Heroes on site in June at the Heroes show in Charlotte, North Carolina, Sheldon show. Amazing show. Like all huge collector centric vintage books, modern books obviously too, but very the most dealers and collectors you're going to get. That in Baltimore are the 2 best shows in terms of getting that concentration of collectors. So we're doing on site there in less than 2 months. So come see us there, submit there. That's a good opportunity to have books graded on site. We're also doing on site in Baltimore later this year. I think that's in October. It actually follows New York.
Baltimore used to be the on-site, like people were like, go to Baltimore for the on-site grading. That was what people used to share.
So I mean, I think Heroes too. I mean, because we didn't do Heroes. Like, the shame of it is that Sheldon, he's a good friend of mine, and he's wanted CGC out there at his show for years. And finally, we scheduled an on-site there in 2020.
Oh wow!
Yeah. It was set to go, and he was like, "Yes!" And of course, COVID comes, and so we finally got there last year, 24, and it was huge. It was great because I think there's a lot of collectors who are reticent to put their books in the mail, and so this was an opportunity for a hotbed of collectors in that area to finally submit their books for grading that probably had been holding on to them for years and years and years. And so it was great. So we're really looking forward to coming back to that. But if you can't to Heroes or Baltimore. We just did C2E2 obviously in Chicago. We have, you can always submit them to the office. I know some people are reticent about mailing them, but we have videos and explaining how to pack your books. Always, customer service there to answer questions if people are curious about insurance coverage or how the books are handled when they checked in. But we're always working towards ways to reach out to the customer and make it easier for people to submit books. Always, just like the holder, just like everything else. CGC is always looking to get better at this stuff.
Yeah.
The submission process is, a way for us to reach more and more people. So we're definitely working in that direction. And so, we got some ideas that we're working on. So yeah, in the meantime, we hope that we visit a city near you, at a show. We take submissions at shows. We do many shows a year. You can check our calendar online. If we happen to be at a show that's nearby you, come to the show, come to the booth, ask your questions. We've got a lot of great people on staff that can answer your questions about the submission process, and hopefully make it, comfortable enough. You can give them to us at the show, and they go back to you from there.
To tap into that, one thing that our site does than many of our competitors is that we track raw graded sales and graded sales. And the benefit of doing both is you can see your raw value book and the potential value that same grade, if you have a near mint copy, can get. It's, let's say, a 9.8, 9.6, 9.4. You can assimilate, basically assess is a better word, of what your value could be based on those grades. We were actually talking about to find some way to integrate with you guys to have some way to want to get this graded, right, and have that in there.
The gap books, right? Like something that the gap between the raw and the slabbed, and if I get it graded, it might be worth more. And
a lot of people don't realize the value. There's so many books. Like, for example, a lot of people thought 90s books was trash, right? Like 90s, all the image stuff that launched, and have a massive nostalgia for it. But a lot of people don't realize is a lot of those first image books are not $150 to $200 in 9.8 now, or $100 to $200, I should say, which is that's basically a $60 value for that raw book if you take out the grading costs. So there is a lot of value in terms of amplifying your book's potential. But just to get into some numbers, just to tap into some of our numbers, all the data we see. So, and this is just to share, a lot of people get frustrated with grading. They think that it's taking over the market. But all the sales that we track, there's 97% of the books that we bring in are raw. 3% are graded. Of those 3% that books are graded, the average user's collection is 84% raw, 16% graded. So 16% graded is the average user. And then I think what was it? 94.
Real quick, this is with over 20 million comics in users' collections on Cover Price. So this is good numbers. Yeah.
So it's really fascinating to see the potential that there's still a lot of people who haven't graded a book, and a lot of people's collections that aren't graded. So there's a lot of potential out there. And the whole point of what we do is also track your whole collection, because you can't look everything up and be able to assess these values. Look at the raw value, look at the potential of the graded value. If that is of mind, if that price amplification is something to you, that is, I guess it's a lot of people should. It's fun for us. Like for me, I really love when I send in I don't do it often enough, because I spend my money that I save for it, and I'll carve some money for grading and I'll spend it at a con. But when I do send in stuff to get graded, I can't wait to get them back. And then I'll start watching haul videos of what people are getting. You get obsessed with finding out the grades. You're going into the site, you're refreshing it every single day. There's something clicks over where you can't wait to see what grade you got.
Would you ever?
It's a lot of fun. The feeling of it is just. It also drives you nuts, because if you're in paper, it's both amazing and awful at the same time.
And maybe that's the the fear factor with some people. Maybe there's the thrill, there's the risk, there's the fear, there's a lot of emotions involved in submitting books and getting the grade results. And some people, I think, they look at certification as a step whenever they're selling.
Yeah.
Maybe they keep it raw, and then when they decide to sell, then they look into certification. There's some people that only collect certified books, and everything has to be certified. And if they're not buying it certified, they're getting it certified.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of aspects to it. It's very interesting. But yeah, I do agree that there's certainly a large, well, certainly by your numbers, there's a large percentage of the market that is collecting, but not necessarily utilizing certification.
I mean, that's the thing. There's so much potential down the road as you grow and expand, and it'll be interesting to see how this shifts. Granted, a lot of people think there's now a lot of books that aren't worth getting graded because of maybe, like someone was asking earlier, like, do you see low grade moderns come through? And I'm sure all the time, but it's like, why would you grade a book that came out yesterday that's a 0.5, right? Like, why would you do that? Because it's not logical. But at the same time, there's the infamous story of The Walking Dead #1 that was on the back of this guy's car that was sitting in the sun for like 5 years, and he had the lowest grade on the census, and people paid a premium because it was the lowest grade on the census.
That's great. That's so funny. I could totally see that because that's one of those rare cases where you have a finite number of copies, but they're all front loaded to the high end. And
right.
So,
or the angry girlfriend, the infamous angry girlfriend.
Yeah.
Class, I mean, it's so funny. People
again, it's this thing we keep talking about. The common thread through all this is that uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think really drives a lot of people's collecting desires.
Uniqueness and nostalgia. Those two things are massive drivers. Right now, we're like, if you're not, a lot of people say that the market's down. The market's not down. It is down for Marvel, and that's always been people's hyper focus for the past 15 years, especially around content, because Marvel is the dominant factor in the aftermarket. It has been. But when that goes down, people think that the market's dropping, and it's just there's a whole bunch of nuances of people just lack of confidence in the content, lack of confidence in some of these characters showing up again. There's a whole bunch of factors, but we see huge boosts in pre-code horror, golden age, 90s, anything nostalgia. Any brand that was 30, 40 years ago is huge right now. Video game books, anything with like there's some of the most obscure comics, anything Dave Stevens, all these Arrows comics, there's all these micro boosts outside of the big two that's happening right now, and it's purely driven by nostalgia and love of a cover, which is interesting. And that always comes into like a lot of conversations around people think like this is to tap into kind of what we want to talk about. I know we're running out of time, but there's a lot of people who say I hate variants need to go away. I hate grading needs to go away. And the important thing to remember is that this is part of an ecosystem, right? It's all one giant machine that helps keep this industry alive. How do you see your place as part of that cog to drive the business further?
Yeah, well, I see that, we grade what we get. We're not, the aftermarket beyond us, what books sell for is not really something that we certainly doesn't influence our business. And, if people pay for our service, we're going to grade the book and put it out into the wild. So we're kind of independent of, market conditions in that regard. At the same time, I realize that we influence market conditions based on what we grade. So it's an interesting dichotomy there. But, at the end of the day, we have no influence on, what the publishers are putting out, the content they're putting out, the variants they're putting out, right. What people are paying for the books. We're just grading what's in front of us. So, we would like, it would be, we would love to partner. We're always trying to work with, the publishers or the distributors or the comic store, the comic stores or the dealers in ways to augment the interest in comic books, the collectability and the readership and all that stuff. So, we certainly want to, to foster that. But at the end of the day, we're just pretty much just kind of I don't know if you want to call it middleman. There was something I think you had mentioned. What was it? We offer a service, but stewards of the hobby.
Yeah. Right.
So I think that's probably more the case with vintage books. The modern books kind of have a life that is going on outside of us, and we're a conduit to that. We grade the books and they go into the market. Sure. But the vintage books are like finite. They've been thrown away. They're rare. You got restoration, all these crazy things going on. So I feel like we're more stewards of the hobby in terms of navigating collectors through the collecting golden age or silver age. But as the books get newer, I think it becomes more of a publisher. What's going on outside, factors or forces outside of CGC. Well, so, but we love, we want to foster and support that any way we can, and we're always looking for ways to do that. So
it's interesting because a lot of people have these conversations around, what's lacking in today's market is patience. And so, we do notice that a lot of people want instant value. This comes with grading. This comes with a book that they buy off the newsstand. They want to see it gain value instantly within the next day. Where when we were growing up, it was like you would buy a book and maybe in 20, 30 years, the whole joke with like the image days with Spawn #1 is that you can send your kids to college with the Spawn #1.
Right.
And my joke is I paid $20 as a kid for Spawn #1, and it took 35 years for me to get that value back.
Right.
So it wasn't the best, but I still love that book.
Yeah.
But
that translates into other things too that you love from Spawn and Todd McFarlane and comic. I mean, it's part of a greater thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of, when it comes down to patience today, like print runs are so small. A lot of people, there's a lot of naysayers on variants, but some of these print runs today are in 50 to 100, 150 to 200 copies, where like books from 30, 40 years ago that had print runs of 6,000, like I think about the Jurassic Park Abercrombie variant. It was I think it was 6,000, 10,000 print run. Now that's the $400, $500 9.8. Yeah. And it was a junk book,
Yeah, a great point is Silver Age, AF-15, certainly X-Men 1, Daredevil 1.
Yeah.
There are probably more copies existing of those books, than of modern books being printed today, even if the copy was saved. Wow. But they're not. I mean, there's only a percentage. So, the scarcity, when you make the correlation, modern books are scarce. The print runs are not, not as high as, so I think the perception is, these modern books are common. It's like, no, there's certainly when you get into nuanced things like newsstand editions, forget about it. But, it's considering the number of people that are reading books and collecting books and buying books and certifying whatever, there's the number of books, the modern books today are really very, very tiny fraction of what they are or were back.
Sure. And you have a lot of spillover from, like, I mean, we've covered it a lot of times. There's a lot of fine artists, that have done covers for comics, 1 or 2 or 3 here. Jason Pollan was a very famous one that we've been talking about recently. He did a partnership with Uniqlo, which is a clothing store. And that cover was ignored for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And now it's a $1,500 raw book, $3,000 and a 9.8. It was a book you got for free if you bought $50 or $60 worth of merchandise from the store.
Yeah.
And now it's like, but Jason Pollan was a famous quick draw artist that people like, he would show in galleries. And, there were plenty of examples of that. If you go back to Schultz or you go back to a lot of famous artists or creators who dabbled in comics or spent some time in comics and then went and did other stuff outside the medium. But,
or like, Turtles 1, Walking Dead 1, where they're within the medium, but their genesis, their beginning was so limited, like that one.
Sure.
That when it blew up, finally, you're like, oh crap! There's only 3,000 copies.
Invincible, like
Invincible. Yeah, it's another example. Yeah, and so you never. Yeah, that's the beauty. So I think that the quality of comics, the creativity that's coming out in comics is, still at an all-time high. People are putting out the best material they ever have, and so it's not something to turn your back on and say, print media, this, that, the other thing. No, it's still, it's a medium that, to me, it's just as powerful as movies and
for sure.
Streaming, because you never know when the next great thing is going to come out. It's not over yet.
And we're huge stewards of variant covers because not only, I know a lot of people get tired of them, and it does get exhausting. There are some there are some nuances where it can suffocate a book, a new release, because it really hurts collectors that can't collect everything, and so they tap out. There are times when a variant is too much, but the nice thing about the variant market is it's putting a lot of artists to work and a lot of retailers to work and a lot of there's a lot of new creators in the space that are exciting to see. There's and then they start doing mainstream, like Mark Spears is a perfect example. He's exploded from doing just a Kickstarter, and then he did, to now doing mainstream comics, and he just did a show where he had a line that was like the longest line at the convention, and he's only been around for like 6 months, and right. he's commanding a line as big as like Jim Lee or McFarlane, which is it's fascinating to see, and that's the power of just a variant comic. It's not, it wasn't a mainstream book that people were picking up.
Just to call out, I want to be respectful of your time, Matt. And
we should. I can stop talking.
No, I mean, we can keep going for sure. Or we can do another interview with Matt and bring him back.
There you go. I like that idea.
But if you haven't registered, or if you guys haven't got into the giveaway yet, those of you who are listening, type in #Cgc. We're giving away 2 premium memberships. And why don't we do that right now? So we have about 50, I think we got up to like 52 or so people watching. And let's see here. All right. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to enter #Cgc. We're going to do 2 of these. And when you win, just reach out to me, John at coverprice.com, or Matt at coverprice.com. Get us your shipping address and we'll get everything organized. We'll work with CGC to get that to you guys.
And while we do that, Matt, I have one more data point for you, just so you would know. Okay. 96% of the slab sales we track are CGC.
96. Wow. Great. Wow.
That's all the sales that we bring in from the aftermarket on a whole. It's not just it's 96% of the greatest sales.
Wow. We're bringing in about 25,000 sales per day. So we literally each year we track anywhere between $400 to $600 million worth of aftermarket sales through Cover Price, and that's limited. I mean, we're doing everything we can to grab as much as we can, but we're pulling from like auction houses and online shops and stuff like that. And that's probably a small percentage of what's really happening in the aftermarket when you look at like Whatnot, eBay Live, and like Instagram feeds and all that kind of stuff sales. So yeah, it's magnify that number is
so basically, Matt, you're doing fine.
Yeah.
Good to hear. I'm very happy to hear that. Very happy.
So give some room to your competitors. Let them. They can take a little bit of space. It'll be fine.
No, never.
but we bring in we bring in everyone. Just to be fair, like we bring in everyone because
I wish everyone the best of luck in their endeavors. We will push as hard as we can to be the best. That's all I can say.
If you want to get to 99%, see if you can hit that.
All right, here we go. Draw number 1. And the winner.
You already have an A. So,
you already have like a strong A. All right, congratulations to Burkerdorfan.
our SP card fan.
That would make more sense.
So we know what he's going to spend his grading cost, the free grading on. Can he spend it on cards? I assume he can.
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
All right, so that's one. Let's do another one. And be sure to reach out to me, John at coverprice.com or Matt at coverprice.com. And we will get this taken care of. And Grumpy G, hey,
we're not so grumpy anymore.
We had half of you now.
Congratulations, Grumpy G.
He changed his name, Less Grumpy G.
Mildly grumpy. Mr. Matt Nelson, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Jumping on.
Thank you.
Fielding the questions. The community. It's such a vibrant community and such a outspoken community. There's always questions. There's always, goods and bads and all this stuff. We really appreciate you taking the time to kind of dive in. I think we just scratched the surface. I think there's probably opportunities for us to talk to you a little bit more in the future. So we'll reach out and see if maybe we can schedule something in a few months or something.
Yeah, I feel like this was fast. I feel like it could have gone for hours.
Yeah, like there's always so much to talk about. Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate, yes, as you said, that this is a very passionate community, and that's what I love about it. I'm passionate. I think we're all cut from the same cloth. We're all fighting the same battle. And so I love being part of this community. So thanks for having me on. We'll definitely do this again in the near future. Give me a call anytime.
Last question: is there a comic book Illuminati, and are you on it?
Saved it for the very end, Matt, didn't you?
Yeah,
then it just cuts to black immediately.
Right. I'm headed there right now. As soon as we hang up, I got to go put my robe on.
You put your robe on.
Right, I'm headed there.
There's
robe.
All the pentagrams and the candles before we got on. That was kind of
and the big Nazi symbol with the girl in bondage and the.
Oh, you don't want that. You don't want that.
Just like a Golden Age Schomburg cover, right?
Thank you so much, everyone who's listening. Be sure to. I just posted the link to the CGC cover price giveaway, giving away some amazing 9.8s from C2E2. Go check that out, and remember, keep those comics covered, everyone.